Hi folks, welcome to today's process video. Right, today's comic is an interesting one in that there isn't much in the way of color, but it still took a while to do because, as I'm sure you've noticed, there's a big difference between the final comic and the initial illustrated version. It was my original intention with this comic that we would just have this lone tree in the middle of the panel, and then I had it envisioned in my head that there'd be a large amount of white, um, obviously designating snow, evoking snow rather, like on the bottom of the panel. Excuse me, and then the sky in the background. I pictured in my head a nice kind of a cloud effect to give the like just to give the look of a very wintry, cold sky and a cold day, for that matter. And yeah, as I went on, for whatever reason, I chose a brush I don't usually choose, which was it was a gouache style brush, but it has like a salty kind of texture to it, like a rough texture. And just I decided, oh, do you know what? I'll give this a shot and see what it would be like for rendering clouds. And I had one of those happy accidents I like to go on about so much, where rather than doing the clouds on the sky layer, or I think what I had done was I created a new layer for the clouds, and that meant to go on top of the sky layer, but I think I had it placed on top of the line layer instead. So when I went to do this this cloud effect, it went over the tree, obviously because the tree is mostly made up of line art, and I was immediately struck by how nice it looked. Like it was very simple but very effective. It gave the impression of like a strong wind blowing, which wasn't what I was intending. You know, like I only wanted to put in some clouds in the background and leave it at that. But yeah, I was immediately struck by how like nice this look, this sweeping effect with it just gave the impression of this strong wind blowing. So I knew right then that the comic would be mainly about this visual of this tree in the middle of the panel, but then it's being whipped by these constant winds. And the way I went about things was I had one layer designated to the foreground wind, the wind that would go over the tree, and then I just on the sky layer I set that to lock transparency, and then for the wind that would be going by in the background behind the tree, I simply put those like elements on the sky layer. And it was an interesting experience because it doesn't look all that complicated, but trying to get these nice, smooth, sweeping motions with the brush, how I liked, was quite difficult. I will admit. Um, excuse me. Sorry, pardon me. Excuse me. But yeah, it was actually quite tricky to get the strokes as I liked, because I wanted to be careful not to create any tangents between the tree and the wind blowing. For those of you not familiar with what a tangent is, it's it's in art, say, where you'll have one line and then you'll have another line, and they'll meet together, like almost on top of each other. And if you're not careful, tangents can have the effect of flattening an image, of making it look a bit dead. So a good thing to do when you're doing art is to try to avoid tangents at all, if at all possible. So you'll notice as you're watching this, like I was constantly going back myself. Like I would do a stroke across the screen, oh, didn't look good, undo, stroke, undo, stroke, undo, and I kept going until I eventually um, got something that looked pretty good. And that was pretty much it. That like the entire comic was mainly that, because I didn't really do much in the way of rendering with the background. Like there's no gradient effect, anything like that, which I would usually do. But yeah, for me the main visual here was the wind and the tree, so I wanted to very much have the main focus be on them. However, one thing I decided to do was, you'll notice the snow at the bottom of the panel. I've added kind of like almost a powdery effect to it. And I have access to a brush in Photoshop. It replicates the look of toothbrush splatter, which is, say, if you dipped a toothbrush in ink or paint, and then you took your thumb and ran it all backwards along the brush rapidly, and just that would send a spray of ink or paint across the page. Like it's something I've done before, but it's quite the messy process. So I quite like the fact I have access to a digital equivalent of that. So I felt it only made sense that if this wind is whipping about, that the snow on the ground would be blowing about as well, especially if it's very powdery snow. And I just simply, like I filled in the line work designating the snow white, and then on top of that, I just started like peppering in this spray effect, and yeah, it turned out quite effective. Other than that, there isn't all that much else to say. Oh yeah, one more thing: the line art around the panels for the borders. I colored those in white as well, because I really like how because I didn't color the snow, like I didn't add any rendering or anything to it. The white of the page, the way that like becomes the snow as well. I really like that. So yeah, I just felt it made it more visually appealing to to remove the panel borders like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's comic. So I will leave it at that, and I will talk to you at the next video. Thanks very much for watching, and take care.